Thanks for listening to the Who's Flying the Plane podcast. I'm Alex, and I'll be chatting to innovative and unique people about their lives, careers, and creative projects. My guest this time is actor and writer Millie Wood-Downie, who's just finished a run of very well-received performances of her debut one-woman show, There Was a Little Girl. What do you remember from drama classes at school?
I remember lots of parachute games and lots of those weird square bean bags which you would kind of throw onto a parachute and you'd pretend to be a cat maybe underneath the parachute with a kind of piece of material hanging out the back of your shorts pretending to be a tail. I'm not sure what that's got to do with drama, but I remember that. And then in secondary school I remember trying to tackle very, very big topics like alcoholism in a really bad, naive way, like using masks.
What do you mean using masks? What was that? I don't even know what that would mean in that context.
So I once did a piece called Terry, and it was about a man who was an alcoholic, and I went to an all-girls school, so me and my friend, who were obviously both young girls, both played this man, Terry. She was sober Terry, who wouldn't wear a mask, and I was drunk Terry, and drunk Terry would come out, would lure behind sober Terry with a mask on, and then we'd have these big flashing lights, and then I'd come out and pretend to be really drunk. I'm not sure what the message was, really.
I mean, it sounds like a creative idea, but maybe, a bit of sensitive subject matter might have been a bit difficult to deal with. But,
slightly, and also just, we had no context of playing a drunk man, so, and I really just don't really know what the angle was, but it was fun.
So how did you go from working on things like that to where you are today? Could you look at your work then? Yeah, could you look at your work then and think, yeah, well, this is, I've got a future? Did you have teachers who could watch that and see, well, there's something in it. There's something that you can develop there. How did it stem from that?
I think I was always the student that got the main parts in all the plays. So I played like Mary in the Nativity play, and I got like Alice in Alice in Wonderland. And I played Drunk Terry, which obviously I should have got an Oscar for. And I had really supportive teachers, and I was always doing all the extracurricular stuff. And it was just kind of natural progression, really. I studied it for A-level. I studied drama and dance. And then I actually fell out of love with acting. And I decided that the industry was just not really in line with my ethos. It just felt very... just not very nice, to be honest. It just felt quite, what's the word I'm looking for? In demand, I suppose, very brutal. And so then I went travelling and decided that it was my favourite thing to do. Like acting was my favourite thing to do, and making theatre. And so I went to uni to do it as a hobby. And I moved to Bristol, and that was kind of my excuse. It was like, I'll go and do something that I enjoy doing. I'll get a degree from it, but I probably won't do it. And then my first lesson at uni was physical theatre, and I'd never done it before. And it was just this big collaboration of dance and drama, which are my two favourite things. And then from that moment onwards, I was like, I'm going to do this.
You mentioned before we started recording that you don't like the process of going to auditions and having your fate in someone else's hands and that kind of thing, which led you to write your own work, including your most recent project called There Was a Little Girl. So could you tell me why you chose to pursue the solo route, what your experience has been with the audition route, and then we can hear a little bit about that project.
Definitely. So I got into the National Youth Theatre when I was 17. And I that was an audition, and I prepared my audition, and I had lots of other people around me that had done the National Youth Theatre and had got in, and it was great. The audition went really well. All the little things that I was told might happen in the audition, for example, them getting you to redo the monologue, and apparently that means that you're in. That will happen. So I left feeling on top of the world and got in and did this great course, this summer course, and they opened up loads of opportunities, so loads of kind of opportunities to be in their plays or be part of their repertoire company. And so I kind of went along auditioning for all these things, kind of on cloud nine, just thinking that was just how it was going to happen. And I didn't get any of them. I remember being like, this is awful. Like, I remember I was kind of carted in. There were hundreds of people there. Half of them looked exactly the same as me. Half of them sounded exactly the same as me. Probably half of them doing the same bloody monologue as me. I remember in one of them, I sang and rapped a song that I had made myself. And obviously it was the first time they kind of looked up from their paper, just being like, did you write that? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, oh, wow, that was really good. And I was like, oh, I've got it. And I didn't get in. They were just obviously excited to see something different. And basically after that, I was like, I just don't think this audition life is for me, because I had to wait, 3-4 weeks to hear back from them. I spent 3-4 weeks preparing for those auditions. So I was like, that's like 2 months of my life gone on something that I didn't get, where I could be spending 2 months making something myself. What I didn't really take into consideration is that obviously the reason that the audition process is so vigorous is because there's actual money in it and people are paying, and there's funding coming from lots of different places. So I was in for a bit of a shock when I realised that I start having to make work with zero budget.
I follow what you do on social media, and I noticed that you've been talking about your Arts Council funding quite publicly, and I know there's been so many funding cuts and things like that over recent years because of the government we have at the moment, and arts has really taken a hit. So you must feel quite fortunate that you've been able to secure funding from it. So could you tell me a little bit about that process? I remember you telling me that it took you about 6 months to just apply for it, let alone hear back from them and all that kind of thing. So tell me how arts funding worked for you.
Sure. So yes, I feel incredibly privileged and lucky to have got that funding. The first time round as well, it's a really difficult thing to get at the best of times, let alone in the middle of a global pandemic. And I think I've been incredibly fortunate that I don't stop talking to loads of different people. And I had a producing mentor that I approached and asked if he would, mentor me basically. And after a couple of sessions with him, talking about what I do, telling about the journey pretty much word for word what I've just told you really, and saying that I wanted to make my own work, he suggested that Arts Council was probably the route for me to go down. I just made a spoken word audio piece called I Want to Be Good, which I think we'll probably talk about a little bit more later on, but the themes from that poem, from that piece, which were kind of gendered attitudes towards women and young girls, and that feeling of like how we feel that we need to be good and to live up to this kind of societal standard, and how that can really affect us and really affect how we present ourselves. I'd only really just like skimmed the surface in this audio piece. So I managed to have Luke, who was my mentor, once a month just hold my hand through it. I know that you were mentioning, Alex, that you had a little look, and they're quite intimidating. Like the application within itself is about 55 pages long, but actually the questions in it are quite short, and a lot of it is logistical stuff. So it's going out and planning the project and just having to put that, word for word inside a document, which can feel like hugely intimidating.
What are they trying to get from you? What sort of information do you need to provide? Because if they've got 55 pages of questions about where you're going to put on a show or something, it sounds like it would be pretty soul destroying to get through it, just to, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, actually what it does, contrastingly really, is it makes you really get to know what the project is. So from the time you finish that application, you know exactly what you're doing it for, you know exactly who you're trying to reach, you know exactly where you're putting it on. The problem with that, obviously, is that if you don't get the money, you've planned this whole project and you know it and in your head it's happening. I think the more that you can allow yourself in that application to believe that you're going to get it, to write the questions as if you are getting it, not I hope to, but I will be, that kind of language, that's the advice I've been given, and it seemed to work for me. The first time I actually put the application in, it came back unsuccessful. But luckily there's four 4 reasons why your application was unsuccessful, and only one of those is that they chose other ones, and your application is fine. You can resubmit it. So I resubmitted it. Then I cried for a bit first, and then I resubmitted it the next day. And then 6 weeks later, I got the funding in early February this year. But yeah, I think it feels completely inaccessible, and it's something that I really hope that this, for example, will kind of bring light to. And like you said, the fact that you followed it on social media and you've seen it, the reason I've been so public about it is just, I am just the same as, hundreds of other artists that are on my social media that are making amazing work. The only difference is that I had someone to hold my hand to teach myself and also to teach me how to write it.
You can go over to the Who's Flying the Plane YouTube channel to see our new series, In the Studio, which gives a behind-the-scenes look into how makers work. You can already watch episodes with a ceramicist, a jewellery maker, and some traditional method printers, and there are many more episodes to come soon, so just search Who's Flying the Plane on YouTube. So you've got your funding now.
I've spent it.
You spent it?
Yeah, it's all gone.
Okay, let's wind it back a bit. Let's say, so at that point, you've just had the successful thing come back. They've said, right, yeah, we're going to give you the funding. Had you written the piece at this point? Okay, so how do you start that? What's the inspiration for it? Did you know going in exactly how it was going to turn out in some way?
No.
Or, yeah, how did the story take shape?
So I knew that I wanted to look at those themes that I spoke about earlier, and kind of these preconceived attitudes towards women, to young girls from birth, from like gender reveal parties, and the fact that we've got the pink balloons and the blue balloons, all the way through to watching rom-coms in my early 20s or in my teens. It's everywhere, this idea of what a woman is, what they're meant to be, how they are perceived, how they're represented in fiction and in life. So I knew that, but that's obviously again quite a big subject, and it was originally meant to be a spoken word play, which I thought I'd be able to execute really easily, but the longest poem I'd ever written was 10 minutes, and this was going to be an hour. So within the application, the application and the funding were for the research and development of the show, for writing the show, and for doing some work in progress showing. So technically the show isn't finished. I've got a complete version of it, but it's not done. So I just started researching. I was taking recommendations through my Instagram. I was kind of getting people to give me books and podcasts and articles, films, anything. The whole Meghan Markle interview with Oprah happened right in the middle of my research. The Sarah Everard, tragedy, that happened slap bang in the middle as well. And that really dictated where the piece was going, and also kind of just highlighted how important it was and how this issue is just not resolved at all. I suppose kind of in the same sense, I'd barely skimmed the surface with my spoken word piece. I think I've barely skimmed the surface with this play as well. But yeah, the amazing thing about having funding is it allows you that space to be able to explore and go down your own journey and let what's kind of dictating you kind of show you the way, I suppose.
Do the people at the Arts Fund have much say in what you do? Do they have? They're nothing at all. They give you the money and they say go ahead and make what you.
This has been everyone's question.
I'd be worried that you've got someone like Big Brother is watching you now, and you have to send it back for approval and stuff.
So
like that. Everyone's
been saying this, and I keep working with people. And they're like, "Did Arts Council give you them?" I'm like, "No, Arts Council didn't give you them." No. So in the application, you pretty much, like I said, you plan the whole thing. So I planned all of my collaborators. I had all those conversations to start with. I managed to work with some incredible people that I just wouldn't have been able to do had I not been able to pay them. And that felt amazing. It also meant I could hire loads of my friends, and I hired loads of my boyfriend and loads of my mates doing, multiple different roles on the project, which was incredible. But no, Arts Council are not Big Brother. They obviously analyse and evaluate your application to start with. And make sure that you are kind of ticking all the boxes. They have a strategy called Let's Create, which is kind of like a diversity strategy. So you have to make sure that you're kind of hitting lots of lots of that. And then you send in an evaluation at the end, and hopefully, still waiting to get mine back, but hopefully they'll release the final 10% of my funding. But yeah, no, you can do whatever you want, but that's why the application is so, there's a lot of hoops to jump through, because otherwise, yeah, you could literally put in anything.
You said that the version of There Was a Little Girl that you've performed up to this point is effectively a work in progress show. What are you looking to change in it? And when are you taking it back on tour, so to speak? Is that something that you're thinking about at the moment, or are you putting it behind and coming back to it down the line, or what's the plan there? And how do you get your inspiration? Is that from audience feedback and things like that? So tell me a bit about that.
So so what I'm going to change, it's a very, very honest play. It's about my life. It's about different ways that I've presented as myself. And obviously I am still myself. And so I kind of wrote the play up until that present point, and I had a lot of revelations towards the end. I would go into more detail, but I will ruin the play for you and I'll ruin it for all the listeners. So I feel like I'll save that. But there was something that I landed on, which was inevitably the crux of the show. It was the ending of the show. And it was everyone's favourite part from the audience feedback that I've had. And so landing on that so close to when the shows were happening meant that there's a real turning point towards the end of it. And I want to make the play more about that idea. I know I'm talking very cryptically, but so I will be using that as my kind of starting point again. And a lot of the stuff that's happened in it, so there's different characters that I meet, and they're kind of my friends or foes throughout my life, and a lot of that will stay the same, but I think it's the kind of overarching kind of idea and message that's so much more prominent in the latter part of the show. At the beginning it's a little bit more wishy-washy, so that's what I want to change. I want to tighten the writing up. I didn't even get a chance to go through and look at like spelling mistakes. It was that, I mean, I wrote the ending on the first show, on the day of the first show, so that will happen. And my plan, I hope, is to do, I've recently moved to London, and I hope to do a run in London, because I didn't do any shows in London. I did them between Bristol and Brighton because they're my real hometowns. So I hope to do a run in London, and hopefully that will be at the beginning of next year. And then potentially Edinburgh 2022, maybe. It's kind of like, yeah, those ideas are just kind of floating about. And inspiration-wise, yeah, the audience, my friends, my family, random people that I've never met before who've given really extensive feedback forms for me, have been so interesting, and it's been really touching actually. Like a lot of people have written some really generous and lovely comments about my performing, which is nice, because I used to perform with my theatre company Penultimate, and it was very, very abstract. And I realised after doing this show, no one ever came up to us after and said, "Oh, you're really good at acting," because we were acting ideas. Yeah. So like, everyone was always like, "Wow, that show is mental. I loved it," but no one ever was like, "You were a really good performer," or "You were a really good actor." So that was a really weird a weird piece of feedback to be receiving, which sounds strange as an actor, but yeah, so that was lovely.
You're at a stage in your career when things are starting to open up a bit. You're getting a few more opportunities and making contacts, and you're getting towards the stage where it's the only thing you're doing with your time. Like, you're sort of slowly giving up part-time jobs and that kind of thing. But obviously it takes a lot of work to get there. So is there any advice that you would give someone who's at a stage of their career when they're just not getting through, where, you know, something that you could tell them that might encourage them or give them a bit of peace of mind that it does just take time and there's luck and other things involved? So just a little bit of advice for someone who's a bit earlier on in their career than you.
Definitely. I mean, the one really big bit of advice I can give is that, like, creativity is such a broad spectrum. And if you can find something else that you love that kind of falls under that remit, which for me was working in social enterprise, if you can find a way of doing what you love in a slightly different form, then really push for it. Most of my work, or 50% of my work, is social enterprise, and I'm a producer, and it's exactly the same as when I produce theatre. It's exactly the same as producing my audio piece. I produce for them, and I get to also kind of make work for marginalised people and work for multiple different communities. It's really rewarding. It's a really safe space to practice my creative skills. You know, sometimes I'll do some like voiceover work for them or do some poetry but also it's a really great, it's a good income and it's really enjoyable work. So I think that if you can find a way of planting yourself into something where you can use your creativity and you can kind of, practice those skills, then do it. Like, I think for ages I was kind of like so set in my ways that you make coffee until you're a famous actor. But that is just not the case. And one thing that my director said to me, which really stuck, was that like no one makes theatre full time. Like no one. Like she's got friends who are big in the game and a lot of them are still teaching or doing workshops or, you know, everyone's got their thing on the side, which is their kind of sustainable thing. If you can find the sustainable thing as something that you love, I think all of the other stuff comes so much easier because I think you're just generally happier. So yeah, that would be my main bit of advice.
Millie, what would you like to offer up as your Who's Flying the Plane hidden gem?
My hidden gem is Creative Connects. They are a community consultancy and social enterprise based in Bristol, run by Roger Griffith, MBE, who has been my boss for 3 years. And we do amazing work connecting loads of different people in the city and beyond. Check them out on Instagram at Creative Connects.
Okay, Millie, finally, could you tell us how we can keep up to date with what you do? And I know you mentioned that there's a fair few things in the pipeline for you and everything. So what should we keep an eye out for and where can we keep up to date with you?
Cool. So my main place is Instagram. So I'm at Millie Wood-Downie. You'll link it, won't you, Alex?
I will.
So it's a bit of a tongue twister, that surname. And I've got my website as well, which is milliewood-downie.com. Very original. But also just shoot me a message or a line. I'm really open to connecting and communicating with people. So, but generally all that stuff will be there. Yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot for talking to me today, Millie.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.